we got a call for a potential new listing in a super elite neighborhood.
George Clooney, his wife, his cousin lives there. Our client Brentel's house is amazing, and if we can sell it, it'll help our chances of becoming partners.
So this would be an excellent place for somebody to post up in.
Yeah.
Like I said, there's various parts of the house that I want to sell, and this is one of the best ones I can think of.
Various parts?
Yeah. Yeah, so there's this room. I think there's a room upstairs. There's a room right in the left wing. I'm willing to part with all those.
What? Why don't we sell this whole house and you just rent a smaller house? Because we can help you do that.
Yeah.
Okay, just pay attention to this thing.
Okay.
This is my house, all right? I don't need this whole house.
Yeah.
I want to sell parts of the house. Those people that buy that part of the house, they can have it. It's theirs. Done.
What
Look, if it sounds crazy to you, let me break it down this way, okay? If I had a library, right, full of books, all right, and I sold you one book, is it crazy? If I want to keep the rest of my books?
No, that wouldn't be crazy if you want to sell a book, but it would be crazy if you sold a piece of a book that you were currently reading. You know what I mean?
Like if you were like, I don't like this chapter, so I'll sell this, but
Because the
it's attached to
chapter
that
makes,
book.
the book makes no sense if you sell chapter 4 through 6.
But if I'm done with the book, why not go ahead and sell it?
Well, are you done with this whole house?
No.
Okay, then you're not done with the book. You still got
Okay.
the end part to go.
Okay, well,
Did he murder her? I'm done talking about books.
You were right behind me.
I'm always right behind you.
Oh, that's so good. Scott, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you. You know, for those who don't know, not just Comedy Bang Bang, not just Bajillion Dollar Properties, but you have been involved in some of the great comedy shows, I think, since your start with Mr. Show.
I was one of the original members of Monty Python.
You used to go by John Cleese, I think, right? Was that your original name?
And I got considerably younger. I was, my very first job was, not my very first job, because my very first job was pouring yogurt at a Christian yogurt store in Orange County, but my very first show business job was for Mr. Show back in the 90s with Bob Odenkirk and David Cross. I was a writer and sometime performer on that. And then, I'm one of the creators and director of Between Two Ferns with Zach Galifianakis.
And then Comedy Death Ray, which became Comedy Bang Bang, and then Earwolf Podcast, which is kind of like a really innovative podcasting network.
We're a comedy podcasting network, and so we started 6 years ago, and we do
at the dawn of podcasting.
Sort of. It felt really late to us at the time, but it kind of is the dawn of podcasting. But we put out shows like How Did This Get Made with Paul Scheer and Jason Mantzoukas and June Raphael.
One of my favorite podcasts.
Oh, thanks. And just, we do a lot of comedy podcasts. We have a new one with Chris Gethard that just debuted this week. So we do about 25 to 30 podcasts with the company every week.
That's amazing. So let's talk about Bajillion Dollar Properties and Seeso. How did this come your way? I know your wife is the writer and creator of this show. How did it get to Seeso? How did Seeso come to you?
Well, my wife, Kulafi Lysak, who created the show, she came to me about, she wanted to do a show. She didn't know what. And then we sit around and we watch these real estate shows all the time on HGTV and on Bravo, obviously $1 Million Listing, this kind of apes. And we were just really fascinated with them. We love watching people go to houses and decide whether or not they're going to buy that house. I don't know, it's a very specific interest, but there seem to be 8 million shows about it. There's even one where people decide if they're going to buy an island or not.
Really?
Yeah, it's like called Island Hoppers or something.
How many
like that.
episodes can you do of that?
That's what I mean.
It's
It's like a mini series. There's like one guy who wants to buy an island. But no, it's a whole series. It's crazy. So we would watch these all the time, and we just started talking about, well, what if we did kind of a fake version of it with comedians playing the people who want to buy houses. And so we hooked up with Tom Lennon and Ben Garant, who did Reno 911, who have a lot of really great experience in this area of doing a Reno 911 style show. This is basically Reno 911, but instead of cops, it's people selling houses.
Right, instead of cops going to houses where there's comedians, it is real estate people going to houses where there are comedians.
Exactly. So we hooked up with them, and they gave us a lot of, they're executive producers as well, they gave us a lot of great tips on how to shoot a show like this. Ben directed several of the first episodes. So,
What kind of, if you don't mind me asking, I mean, maybe this is too in the nitty gritty, but what kind of tips were you looking for? Is it like scheduling tips or like
it's
stuff
it's
like
a
that?
little like, okay, so you have a location, you have this incredible house. How do you make it seem like 8 different houses? Because you want to shoot as much as possible in one location, because it's not economical to shoot every single scene you ever do on a show in a different place. Like just the travel time in between all the houses would be like 2 hours, right? Yeah. So we had one house in Malibu that we were in for 3 days, and I think we shot probably 20 scenes inside of it, literally. And it's a restaurant for part of it. We use the kitchen for one house. We use a bedroom for another house. And so we talked a lot about that, because that's what they would do on Reno 911. Was they would find like a street corner and say, okay, if you point the camera this way, we're going to shoot Nick Swartzen on roller skates, dancing around. And if you point the camera that way, we're going to have Jonah Hill like trying to avoid the cops over here. And so it was a lot of that of like, how do you roll a bunch of comedians through every single day, and then structurally with the jokes, how do you make the jokes in such a way that you're able to mine them for several episodes? It was a lot of like really specific stuff like that they're experts at. But yeah, then we pitched the show around. It was the very first show that my wife had ever pitched. And we pitched it to, I think, 6 or 8 places in 2 days, and 2 of the places wanted to buy it, and Seeso was one of them, and they gave us a great deal where they wanted to just put it into production and not make a pilot. And so
You're also their sort of platform show. You're they're really their first show until Dan Harmon's gets released, which I don't think it's been released yet.
Harmon's hasn't been released yet.
So it's essentially, I mean, that's like something special. That's like the Nick going to Cinemax or something like that. You are this.
We're the Mad Men of Seeso, basically. Just as good, just as critically acclaimed. But yeah, I mean, it was great. They said, you know what, we really love this idea. We want to make a ton of episodes with you, and we're just going to put it into production. We want it to be our first thing coming out, and it's been a great play. A lot of people don't know what Seeso is, but it's a streaming service. It's kind of like Netflix or Hulu, but it's just aimed at comedy. So if you're like a comedy fan, it has every episode of Kids in the Hall. It has every episode of Monty Python, all remastered in HD.
Kids in the Hall is dangerous for me. I've had every episode of Kids in the Hall in my collection before, and I had to kind of put it away because it was just I would always put it on. I could never get sick of an episode of Kids in the Hall. It was,
no, they're the greatest.
It was comfort for some reason.
Yeah. So it has, it has all the late night shows. It has every episode of SNL throughout the years. So it's a really great, and then they're doing these original shows like Dan Harmon's Harmon Quest and our show. So it's a really cool, exciting place to be, and it's really exciting to have like the first thing on it. And people are kind of, every question I get is like, what is Seeso? And once people know what it is, it's going to be amazing.
And this is also an exciting place for you to be as well, not just as a performer, as a writer, but in many ways you are a producer. You help shape ideas. You help shape
in the very way that I'm credited on it as producer.
But working with a new network that's obviously going to grow and build more shows, I mean, that's a place, sort of, I would say a good place for you to be in the same way that like maybe IFC was when they started getting into more comedy programming.
Yeah, Seeso it's an amazing opportunity. I'm doing another show with them down the line with Cameron Esposito and Rhea Butcher called Take My Wife. They're 2 comedians who are married to each other. And it's a really interesting sort of almost Louis take on 2 women who are married to each other and also comedians working in the same business. I think it's a really interesting show. So there's a lot of opportunity at Seeso, and there's a lot of opportunity at a lot of different places. It's such an exciting time to be working in TV right now because you can make these small, quirky shows that, maybe back in the day weren't going to get millions and millions of viewers, but a place like Seeso can really build a brand on them.
Now, I have to ask you, you mentioned Between Two Ferns.
You don't have to.
No, I don't.
But go ahead.
You created Between Two Ferns with Zach Galifianakis. Mm-hmm. Really I would say one of the first mainstream sort of internet videos that just really took off. Everybody knew what it was. Sort of comedy videos on the internet kind of were built off of that, almost like The Landlord.
The Landlord was a little bit before, but Funny or Die was new when we put it up on Funny. The first one we put up on Funny or Die just on a whim because we had some friends who worked there.
Was that the Michael Cera one?
Michael Cera one, yeah.
Who was there anybody that came on between Two Ferns who I know you don't always show them the questions beforehand, except for maybe with Obama.
Obama, we had to show him the questions. That was the one exception that we made.
Was there anyone who was actually made uncomfortable by any of the questions? I mean, even though they know it's a joke, they know that Zach is messing around. Was there anyone that was like, that cuts a little too deep?
We're actually, Zach is a super nice dude and is so uncomfortable asking these questions. You wouldn't think it because he does it really weird, but we do a thing where we sort of play good cop, bad cop, and Zach will sort of play really embarrassed and go, I don't want, and he'll call across to me and go, I'm not going to ask that question that you want me to ask. And I'll go, Zach, I think you really should. It's a really funny one, and he blames me for it. And then he kind of feels okay about asking it if it looks like I'm the one who wrote it. So, but I think there's some people who, you know, they usually know what they're in for, and we try to make them feel comfortable. And we say, if there's anything that you don't feel comfortable about, we'll cut it out, or, you know, we work with the people. It's not, I'm not really comfortable doing like sort of gotcha prank type stuff, even though it kind of feels like a prank. People are usually into it. They know what to expect. The last one we did with Brad Pitt, he called us, really wanted to do it, and fit it into his schedule. So it's, you know, we're working with people who really want to be there.
But even with that one, what I think is so interesting about the Brad Pitt one is, so you've reached a level of success with this web show where you have President Obama and you have someone like Brad Pitt who's calling, and he knows what he's in for, so he's showing up game to get ribbed a little bit. So you guys kind of have to step your game up a little bit.
Yeah, what we try to do, and what I really want to do with these is I always want there to be at least one thing that they would never be asked by any reputable news outlet. You know, so with Brad Pitt, you know, I think we did the joke about what was it like when you first met Angelina Jolie? Was it sort of like a Ross and Rachel type of situation, you know? And
well, there was also the what's it like living in your wife's shadow joke that he was asked as well.
You know, and he was just, you know, if it were a normal interview and someone were to ask him that, it would be shut down. But because he knows what he's in for and he knows that he's going to have to get some of that, he was, you know, just game for it, and it's really funny, you know.
Now, some of those have the guest sort of takes it in a specific direction sometimes as well. Like I'm thinking like the Ben Stiller one, he walks off, he punches the curtain. There's like there becomes like a sort of narrative built into this interview. Is that something that they end up bringing along, or are you sort of asking them or thinking like, I think it'd be good if this interview went this way? And
sometimes they're really collaborative. I mean, with the Ben Stiller one, we shot it here. I think we were at the Plaza. I think we were in a hotel room. And it was just really collaborative where we were there for a couple hours. We just tried a whole bunch of stuff out. And I remember him punching the wall and everything. I think we had 60 seconds left of tape on the thing, and we were like, we need an end. What can we do? And we just like Stiller riffed that and did, you know, and we were like, oh, thank God we had 60 seconds left, you know, because it became the end of it. But a lot of times, you know, we'll have an idea. Like I remember the Steve Carell one. The idea for that, we had never done one where people knew what the videos were and were ready to insult Zach just as hard back. And so I think Steve Carell came and didn't really know what the idea was and was like, what do you want me to do? And then we had a whole bunch of insults for him on a piece of paper, and he read them kind of going, what? And then as we started like rehearsing it, he was like, oh, I understand. And then like that's one of my favorite ones. Like he's genius in it. So, but a lot of times it's just, you know, the classic version of just sitting there and going, okay, now you're just going to be insulted and you get mad. Those are the ones that people really like, you know, so... but there's all sorts of like little things, like we'll have a bucket of slime, you know, during the Justin Bieber one, and you know,
I think Carrot Top in the background of the Bradley Cooper one might have been one of my favorite, just sort of random sides.
Well, we shot that in Vegas.
That's why Carrot.
That's why Carrot Top was there. But yeah, he's great. He's so nice and funny, and came by and did that as a favor to us. And, you know, Bradley Cooper, we shot that literally, I think, the weekend before The Hangover came out, in a hotel room in Caesars, because the movie shot in Caesars. And
or Hangover 1?
For Hangover 1, yeah.
Wow.
And Bradley and Zach are so funny together, and he's done 2 at this point, and they just have a really good time, feeding off of each other. And so, just to add Carrot Top in the mix is something.
But who does nothing? He's just on his phone. It's like, what's up?
Yeah, no, those are all Zach's ideas. Like, Zach will constantly, when we're just about to do one, like 1 day ahead of time, he'll write to me and go, I want Carrot Top in this. And then you have to scramble to make Carrot Top happen. And, he's super nice and did it last minute, but those are the kind of ideas Zach has all the time that it's just like, from a production standpoint, from a director's standpoint, it's like, okay, how do we make this work? I think in the Will Ferrell one, we had the floor collapsed. And that was like a last minute thing he wanted to do. I want the entire floor to collapse. And so you have to like sort of figure it out, and figure out how you're going to do it.
When did you realize, after you joined Mr. Show, when did you realize that you wanted to maybe be, you're in front of the camera for a Comedy Bang Bang, but you're also very much a writer, a director between Two Ferns, is that you write on a number of award shows, which we were talking about back there. When did you realize that maybe writing and directing was more the place that you wanted to be with comedy?
I started out as a performer, but as a performer, I wrote these, pretty intricate bits. I started out in a duo act. And they were very written bits. It wasn't like I was going up and improving and stuff. And then I was also writing a comedy film at the time, a script, just a spec script. So I was always really interested in writing. And that's, I started out as a playwright, where I went to school and I wrote plays. And so I was always very, very interested in that. And actually, but I also started out as a performer. And so what was interesting is when I joined Mr. Show, Bob and David both took me aside and cautioned me and said, you're not writing for yourself, you're writing for us. So, don't, sort of in a rude way, they were like, don't constantly write yourself into sketches, I think it was. And so it became this.
Like, we will fire you.
Yeah. And so it became, and then they ended up very nicely putting me in all the sketches, because they're just nice dudes, But it became a thing where I sort of became known as a writer more than as a performer. And after Mr. Show, I had, I think, one deal for a TV show that was going to star me, and then it never got made. And then I pretty much just kind of sank into just writing all the time. And I would just write TV shows and movies that never got made.
Sort of like where opportunity knocks, sort of.
Yeah,
keep
literally
going.
3 times a year I would write a movie or I would write a TV show. And I would spend a lot of time on it. It would come out relatively well, and then I would get the call of, okay, this is not moving forward. So that would happen 3 times a year, basically. And it's like one of these very odd jobs to have that when I was talking to my parents.
How many scripts for TV shows or movies do you think that you have in a closet that are unmade?
30 to 40, probably.
Do you still go out and pitch those, or is it like if they didn't get picked up, it's dead?
Once something doesn't get picked up, it's usually dead. Some of the movies, every once in a while, will sort of come back up again. There's one movie in particular that Bob Odenkirk and B.J. Porter and I wrote that kept almost getting made. And it got the green light at MTV Films with Rainn Wilson starring in it. And then literally a week
collapse.
Literally a week later, yeah, they collapsed or something, and it got the red light. So, and then another one for NBC, I made an hour-long drama comedy detective pilot that got the green light, and a week later got the red light. So, and then the Tenacious D movie that I wrote got the green light and then the red light. So, that would happen all the time. So after 10 years of it, I was sort of just used to. Louis C.K. told me something once, where he said, when you're writing something, you have to believe with all of your heart that it's going to get made and it's going to be the greatest thing that anyone has ever seen. And then when they say they're not going to make it, you have to immediately go, okay, that's fine, and just forget about it, but it's good advice because it would happen 3 times a year to me. And after 10 years of that, it's just kind of like, oh, okay, yeah, another thing's not getting made. And so I was kind of like adrift in my career where I didn't, I started as a performer and now I'm a writer, but no one's ever seeing anything I'm doing. And so for fun, I started this podcast with me as the host, which started as a radio show, and just to do it for fun, for free, and I wasn't getting paid. And that really transformed my career, and I started getting so many opportunities just from doing this thing for fun. that now, I have a TV show and I'm able to produce all these other shows. So it really was the decision, I think, that I made that really kind of changed my life, was to get back to doing something just for the fun of it and not these high-paid movie scripts that I was getting a lot of money for that never got made.
When it came to those high-paid movie scripts and TV scripts, just sort of one more question about them. I'm curious because you're talking about getting rejected and then not going through. When you finished writing them, were they always at a point where you felt like they were makeable, or did you get to a point where you were kind of like, this might not get made, let me get it to a point where it's readable, and we'll fix it later if it actually goes anywhere?
Yeah, I think, I got better as I went along at it. So I bet if I looked back at some of the old ones, I would be kind of embarrassed by them. But no, some of them were quite good. I mean, I remember I did write a little bit on the movie Shark Tale for DreamWorks Animation with Will Smith, but mainly I was there to write the sequel. And I was there so early in the production of the first one that I ended up helping out on the first one. But I remember DreamWorks said for the sequel, they said it was the best script that they had ever gotten, in the same sentence as, we're not going to make this. so
Wait, how does that go? This is the best script we've ever gotten. I'm sorry to say, we just can't go forward with it right
yes, that happens all the time.
now. But why?
Well, I mean, it had to do with, the formula that they have for, like, the first one made this much money. If it had made 15 million more, a sequel would have been definite, or some, stuff like that. So you just get kind of used to that stuff. Some of the things I'm very proud of, that NBC pilot that I was telling you about, I love that script. I think it's one of the best scripts I've ever written. I still think about that sometimes. I was talking to Andy Samberg about it the other day, and just, he's doing Brooklyn Nine-Nine, obviously, but I think about it as like, oh, this could be a good movie, or, so some of them I think about a lot, and some are probably terrible.
Can you go back to them, or are they owned by whoever greenlit and then redlit them?
There's a certain point where rights revert back to you about something. So and it's so complicated, but anything you write, I think another company could buy if they give the original place the money for it. But some great things. I'm producing a show that I was producing it for one company that decided not to do it, and then you just never know what'll happen. Now it's getting made in England, actually. For Sky Atlantic, and that will happen sometimes, where it's just, you're always trying to sort of, like, anything that you really believe in, you kind of go, there's got to be a place for this somehow. I was producing a show for another place recently, a network, and they turned it down, and it's one of the best scripts that this writer, Jessica Gao, wrote it, and it's so funny. And so we ended up selling it to an internet company who's going to make a movie out of it. So, it's like, if you really believe in something, you never want to really let it go, but oftentimes you really have to.
I want to ask you about a Mr. Show sketch. As a fan, as a comedy fan, this sketch is always in my head. I think it's a classic. I can't remember the name of it though, but it's the sketch. It's the Corey Feldman sketch.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Where the guy.
Yeah, I wrote that one.
You wrote that one.
Yeah,
That's what I thought. That is one of the funniest sketches on that show, and I think of all time. It's so. Where did that come from? I mean, it is so. It's a dead-on impersonation of Feldman, especially the Michael Jackson-esque performance at the beginning.
Well, I'm so mad because that was a dance I used to do all the time.
Oh, really?
And I taught it to the person playing that role, and I gave it away. It's like my funny dance that I would do, and I gave it away to this dude. Yeah. But so it started. It was one of my first days, I think, on Mr. Show. But we were laughing about. We were watching A True Hollywood Story, and I think it was about Corey Feldman. I can't remember, but it was, or maybe it was about MC Hammer. And I think it was MC Hammer because what we thought was really funny was he was complaining about how he went bankrupt, and he started blaming the fact that he had money for the fact that he went bankrupt. He's like, no one told me how to use this money, no. And it's like, well, and so we riffed that money should come with a warning label on it, that if you spend it, it's not yours anymore. And so I think that was Brian Posehn who riffed that, and they said, great, write it up. And so I feel really bad because Brian stepped out for the afternoon and was working on something else, and I wrote that script up, and he came then I finished it and I showed it to him, and he was like bummed. He's like, I wanted to write that with you. I'm sorry. I was like, I'm sorry, I wrote it. And that was one of the only times on Mr. Show for me that those guys read it and said, great, just put it into production. Usually we would do like several rewrites of everything, and that was one where they were just like, perfect as is, let's just do it. So
I love like the Goonies references, like Goober Patrol and Tuna Fishing '87, which was clearly a reference to Corey Feldman's appearance in Meatballs 4 or whatever he was in. It was so detailed and specific to that person's career. What made you go towards him rather than sticking with Hammer?
You know, there's a little Hammer part of it in there about where the main guy says that he built a glass house on a hill. Because Hammer actually did that, where he in Oakland, where he's from, he says in his True Hollywood Story, he built a mansion on the hill in Oakland so that everyone in Oakland could look up to it and be inspired as to what they could become. And I was just like, that is a terrible, like, F you to the people in Oakland. But I think it was about Corey Feldman. I don't know. We were all fascinated with Corey Feldman. Like, David and I went to see Corey play in a bar once with his band, and so I think he was on our mind. And Corey actually played at our rap party as well, and Bob and David went up and sang with him. And
what did he think of the sketch? Had he seen it?
I don't know that he'd seen it. Maybe he had. Maybe he didn't care. I don't know. Maybe it was like $1,000 that he really needed. I have no idea. But he was a great sport about it. Like it was in this strange revolving restaurant that we had a couple of our rap parties in, which always, because you're constantly moving in this restaurant, everyone was on like various drugs, and it just makes you feel strange, you know. And then Corey Feldman starts playing with his band, and
which if you've ever seen Corey Feldman perform with his band,
The Truth Movement,
it is one of the strangest things. It's really incredible.
It's weird. I know one of the times David saw him, he started the show by like he had a trunk of all of his Michael Jackson clothes that he lit on fire while he was singing a song about like how he was reinventing himself or something.
And proceeded to rebuy Michael Jackson clothes on eBay.
Like, I shouldn't have lit those on fire. Uh-oh.
I think we have some time for questions from the audience. Does anyone have any questions out here?
Great. We're going to start with a question from an online viewer. So Mick would like to know, what celebrities or comedians do you hope to have on future episodes?
On future episodes of Comedy Bang Bang, or on, or on anything. I would love to work with David Letterman. David Letterman is my idol. I would love to have him on something. I think he retired recently. I heard something about that. I'm such a fan. He's great. I would love to do anything with him. We keep sending him requests for all sorts of stuff, so hopefully he'll pop up in something down the line. The one person that I really wanted to work with that came true was Pee Wee Herman. My show Comedy Bang Bang is really influenced by David Letterman and Pee Wee Herman, and so to have Pee Wee Herman on the show, and he was doing all new bits that one of my writers on Comedy Bang Bang, Paul Russ, wrote his new movie that's out.
Which is fantastic. The new movie, I
great.
watched it this weekend. It is pure delight.
Yeah,
it's just
it's so much fun.
Yeah.
And they knew each other really well. So Paul Rust and Paul Rubens wrote all new Pee Wee bits for my show, which was like such a thrill. So it's got like a big chunk of like 15 minutes of all new Pee Wee material. And when I watched the new movie, there's actually a little chunk in it that is sort of like a bit he did on my show. I was like, he did a variation on this. The snake thing, the signing all the forms. He did that on Bang Bang, and I was like, wow, that's so cool that he like debuted that bit on my show. So that was a huge thrill for me.
Absolutely. Next question.
Hey Scott, good morning.
Hi, good morning. What's your shirt say? Fiend?
Fiend,
Yes.
yeah.
Great.
It's a Monday.
I don't trust you.
All right. Yeah. Going back to the subject of podcasts, I know that's the big craze right now. I have a couple of friends who are trying to break in and do that. I've also had conversations with Kevin Smith, and he says that's the way to go. Now, with everybody hopping on that bandwagon, how does
Badwagon sounds better, doesn't it?
Right?
Badwagon. That's not a bad
Those words
podcast
out.
title either.
Why not?
The
That's an
Badwagon.
idea. I'm keeping that.
Pop culture crazes that never took off.
But how does one stand out when doing that, when a lot of people are now getting involved?
Right. Well, the cool thing about podcasts that I think your friend should know is like anyone can start one. You know, like I have a podcast network, but you don't have to be on one. It's free. Like all you have to do is buy the equipment. The whole reason I started the podcast network is because most comedians don't want to buy equipment, or they don't want to learn how to hook things up, you know? So I started a podcast company so that comedians could just come in and record and not have to worry about like uploading to the internet. But all that stuff, it doesn't take that much to learn how to do. Anyone can upload anything onto the internet, and iTunes pretty much doesn't turn down really any podcasts that I know of. But, you know, really anyone can have a podcast on iTunes. So the how to get it to stand out is a different thing, but, you know, kind of what I talk about with all of the podcasts on our network is reliability. Is the biggest thing. You have to do it reliably. You have to do it every week is what I would suggest, if not twice a week. Because people need to get used to your voice, and they need to know that it's coming so they can look forward to it. If you have like a spotty attendance record and you're like, I put this out every 3 months, you know, then it's hard to develop an audience. So really, you know, all you can do, you never know if something's going to hit, but if your voice is unique and you're putting out product constantly, you're going to find that audience, and you're going to find people who really like it, and then hopefully you can build from there.
Next question.
Hey, Scott. Right.
Oh, hi, right there.
How's it going? So I'm a huge Tenacious D fan. I love
cool.
I love the HBO show, Pick a Destiny. When I was 11, actually, I got, you know, the self-titled album with Kyle Gassnake and Jack Black Naked Behind the Devil. I got that when I was 11 years old. Changed my
Nice.
life.
Yeah.
So I really have to know, if the movie would have been made, what would have been the premise?
Okay, the original Tenacious D script, which I still am very proud of, was basically Jack and Kyle found that they were descendants of the original sunken city of Atlantis, and it was a road trip comedy where they were traveling to Miami to open for Ronnie James Dio, and when they opened, there was a certain song that would make the city of Atlantis rise if Jack and Kyle sang it. They didn't know that. Jack was just like, through his subconscious writing a song, he thought it was just a regular song, but it actually was the mystical incantation that would make the city of Atlantis rise. And there were mysterious forces who were trying to prevent that as they went down this road trip. Yeah, I thought it was funny.
I think we have time for one more question, right here.
Hi, Scott.
Hi.
You've had Comedy
You
Bang
look like a
Bang.
prisoner.
Yeah, being a prisoner, it's fine. You've been on Comedy Bang Bang so long, and like you build mythologies around the characters you have, like Gillian Jacobs.
Hard G.
Her ongoing saga with like Gary Marshall and stuff.
Right.
I was wondering if someone is in charge of keeping tabs of what's in the continuity before you bring a character back.
Actually, my assistant on the television show, she started the Comedy Bang Bang Wiki, I think, and that kind of has become a vital resource for us. There are some people who are more in charge of it than others. Jessica St. Clair, when she does Marissa Wampler, she writes down everything that her character does, and then she comes in and tells us what we're going to do. With Gillian and Paul as Gary Marshall, sometimes we'll listen to it the night before and go, oh yeah, I forgot this. Paul usually does. I don't have time to do that usually, but Paul will usually go, oh, I just listened to it, and here's what we talked about last time. And we'll try to make sense of it, you know. But there is like a wiki out there of all of the characters. I'll tell you one time, Taran Killam and Paul Britton from SNL, the horse fighting, yeah, they wanted to do it on the TV version. They had riffed a really funny podcast episode where they were horse fighting promoters, where horses would punch each other until they were dead.
Horse fightings are like a real thing in Thailand.
I know people will not stop tweeting me about it. But so it's a really funny episode, like one of our classic episodes, and they wanted to do those characters on the TV show, but none of us could remember what they talked about. So I had my assistant listen to the episode and type out a summary of everything that they talked about, and then emailed it to us all, and it is the craziest thing to read to read that in just like paragraph form is so odd. Of like, well, they started when they were 12 years old. They birthed 700 horses a year. So there are people who are way more in charge of it than we are, and God bless them.
Well, Scott, I got to let you go, but Bajillion Dollar Properties is on Seeso right now. You guys can sign up for Seeso by going to Seeso.com. It's a really fantastic comedy network.
Yeah, and people can get a month for free, I think, right now. And
Yep.
so episodes come out on Thursdays, so,
It's incredibly funny. I've seen the first episode and it has Adam Scott in it, and he's so funny. The cast is really great.
Yeah,
Congratulations.
such great people. We have David Koechner on the show and Gillian Jacobs, the aforementioned, and pretty much anyone in comedy has just rolled through and had the time of their lives. It's a really, really funny show. I'm very proud of it.
Absolutely. Scott, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Congratulations.